Hi, everyone. So we'll start this seminar. Dear delegates, OECD staff, and guests, I am delighted to open this STI PI seminar organized by our Productivity, Innovation, and Entrepreneurship Division in the Science, Technology, and Innovation Directorate. My name is Rudy Verlhac. I'm an economist here in the division, working on productivity and business dynamics, and in particular on projects called Dynamp and Multiprod, which looks at productivity and business dynamics in a cross-country setting, leveraging firm-level data available across countries. I will share this SPI seminar, and today we are very pleased to have our speaker, Marina Rybalka, who is a researcher at Statistics Norway in the Division for R&D, Technology, and Business Dynamics. Marina mostly works with empirical analysis of firm behavior, industrial organization, and development. She was also a leading member of the teams evaluating different public schemes Norway, the regionally differentiated social security contribution scheme, and Norwegian Innovation Cluster Program. She was also a coordinator for Norway in EU Horizon 2020 project Global Into, capturing the value of intangible assets in microdata to promote the EU's growth and competitiveness. Today, she is still involved in RENITI, the role of research, skilled labor, and innovation in the corona crisis, and InProd, for labor market inclusion and labor productivity projects. So today, Marina will present a report analyzing the development and characteristics of Norwegian high-growth companies over the period 2005-2023. This report distinguishes between companies in different growth phases, startups, scale-ups, and intermediate stages, and uses both national and international definitions and data sources. So before we begin, I would like to remind you of a few housekeeping rules. So this is an hybrid event. For those in the room, if you want to ask a question, you can use the microphone. For virtual participants, you are welcome to ask questions, of course. You can use the Q&A feature of the Zoom application or the chat. If you want to ask a question directly, you can raise your hand and we will assist you in enabling your microphone. So before we start with the presentation, I am really honored to invite Siri to deliver some opening remarks for this seminar. So Siri is Minister, Counsellor, and Deputy Permanent Representative of Norway to the OECD. So thank you very much again, and the floor is yours.
Thank you so much for inviting me. Yes, microphones are important. Thank you so much for inviting me to this seminar on productivity, innovation, and entrepreneurship, and to provide some brief welcome remarks. I understand that the Directorate for Science, Technology, and Innovation arranges several of these seminars within the MapProdl GIS product on using microdata in analysis of productivity, innovation, and growth, inclusion, and sustainability. These hybrid seminars are a good and practical way of bringing together researchers and policymakers to discuss key challenges related to economic growth and productivity. Productivity growth and business dynamics, the process of firm entry, selection, and growth, are important drivers of economic dynamism and growth, and therefore of increasing living standards and long-run prosperity of our economies. OECD countries have, however, experienced a pervasive slowdown in productivity growth and profound changes in the business environment over the last decades. These are reflected in the growing productivity gap between the most productive and the least productive firms. Declines in business dynamism, characterized by reduced rates of firm entry and job reallocation, but also rising industry concentration and markups. Understanding how firm-level productivity patterns translate into aggregate productivity is a key challenge for policymakers. For instance, low productivity growth in a country can be due to the presence of too many firms at the bottom, pointing to weak market selections, or to too few firms at the frontier, implying a lack of innovation. Each of these cases calls for very different policy responses. The issue today reflects research on what characterizes startup firms in Norway. And we will, as you have already heard, we will hear from Marina Rybalka from Statistics Norway. She will present her recent research paper published in 2025. The paper is titled From Startup to Scale, a study of Norwegian startups and scale-ups over the period from 2005 to 2023. This research paper focuses on dynamism, taking full advantage of using Statistics Norway's firm-level data. It provides many interesting findings, including how the concentration of high-growth firms to aggregate productivity has changed over time, and how young high-growth firms evolve in the market in the medium term. It has gained wide attention. For instance, the research paper is cited as one of the key recent empirical findings in the forthcoming OECD Economic Survey of Norway. As a separate research project, Marina Rybalka and Statistics Norway are currently working on an ongoing multi-prod microdata project, which is a collaboration between STI, Statistics Norway, and the Norway country desk of the OECD's Economics Department. The aim of this project is to support policy discussions in the forthcoming OECD Economic Survey of Norway that will be launched before the summer. Additionally, the results from this multi-prod project are planned to be used to generate micro-aggregated data used in cross-country analysis by the Directorate for Science, Technology and Innovation. So I wish you good luck with this ongoing and important work and an interesting seminar today. Thank you.
Thank you so much for this welcoming remarks. Now I'm very pleased to invite Marina to present her work. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much for inviting me. Today I will present my joint work with my colleagues from Statistics Norway, Erik Fjarli and Ida Nygård, on high growth enterprises in Norway, with specific focus on the young and promising companies and their way to growth. And there are numerous studies on high growth enterprises, who they are, where they are, and what is their contribution to the growth, but it's still a scarce knowledge on the way to growth. And what we try to fill here by this analysis and make a step in this direction is to bring more knowledge on the way from startup to scale. I will go through some motivation for this study. I will introduce in more details our taxonomy of high growth enterprises in different stages. I will provide some evidence on international comparisons and access to private capital. I will show some insight on distribution, how distribution of high growth enterprises changed by country and industry, and I stop in more details on the path from startup to growth. And why do we talk about high growth enterprises? Most people here are known with this topic and the importance of this topic. And on the one side, we wish to have some dynamism in the economy, and a high entry and exit rate may indicate that the economy have a high dynamism. And if very few enterprises enter an exit, market indicates stagnation. But based on the theory of creative destruction, we do want that scarce resources are reallocated from ineffective old companies to new, more dynamic and more innovative firms. On the other hand, we want to have some good examples and motivation for the new established firms that they can see and feel that they can reach some good results and they can grow. And we do need some new locomotives with the same arguments as creative destruction. We do want to have new locomotives to have more competitive frontier to push it further. And it's positive both for competitiveness at the national and international level. And especially for Norway, we do want to have new locomotives to find new alternatives to petroleum sector. At the same time, there is no optimal enterprise size. What is the definition here? It depends on many factors like availability of input factors and scarce resources, availability of product markets, which production technology is available, market distance, and some other factors which imply high heterogeneity. Regional policy can also influence growth opportunities both positively and negatively. And it's very wide agreement in the literature on limiting factors for growth. The two most mentioned factors are access to capital and skilled labor. There are a lot of reports on that, and one on the reports, national reports from Men and Economics show, for example, that two-thirds of companies, they find it difficult to find relative skills. Also, natural condition and policy, culture and attitudes can be limiting factors for growth and even wealth. And what do we mean by high growth enterprises? What is the measurement period and what happens afterward? So here we take first step from the very well-established definition of high growth enterprises implemented by Eurostat and the OECD, which state that a high growth enterprise measured by employment, which we use here in this analysis, is an enterprise with average annualized growth in the number of employees greater than 10%, or in many examples, 20% per year over a 3-year period, and that has at least 10 employees in the start of this 3-year period. So we use the same 3-year period in our analysis. We use the same growth rates, both 10 and 20, to define different groups of high growth firms. But we also extend this definition in different directions to catch up other groups of firms which are potentially might become high growth enterprises, because we want to catch up this and cover this path from being potential to become high growth enterprise. And we used the definition of growth by employment versus to growth to revenues, which used in some studies, due to different reasons. We have analyzed very long-term period, almost 2 decades, and revenues, they show to be very volatile and sometimes very temporary indicator for growth. And we wanted to have more stable measure. Also employment, we look at this as a long-term investment from the firm side, because if you hire, it's a high signal, very strong signal that you have intention to grow. It's more difficult to fire people in Norway. I guess it might be difficult in other countries too. So it's very strong signal that you have intention to grow. And another argument that increasing employment have very clear positive spillovers on their growth consumption and growth in the contribution to value added. So given these arguments, I can proceed to present you our taxonomy of high growth enterprises. But before that, I want to show you some numbers from our business demography statistics, just to get feelings which group of firms we talk about. Here, the numbers are presented here from 2023, the last year in our analysis, but the scope of these numbers is almost the same in each year of this long-term period. So each year, there are about more than 70,000 new registered enterprises in our business register, and only 1 or 3 of them have some activity in form of positive turnover or positive salaries. And when we accumulate these active firms through the 5-year period, so to identify startup enterprises, we end up with about 90,000 firms in 2023, where 60,000 are limited liability enterprises. And again, following many analysis from OECD, we wanted to focus on the employee enterprises which have at least 1 employee, because we study the growth in employment. And then it's a half of this active population of active enterprises. And most of them are limited liability companies. And if we look how many are growing enterprises, it's very small amount. It's under 10% of employee enterprises in Norway are growing. When we zoom in on these growing enterprises, and here we go broader than definition from OECD, they are 4 years years old from the first activity. They have at least 1 employee enterprises, but they have average annualized growth at least 10% in the last 3 years. And from this group, then we identify some subgroups which have potential for become high growth enterprises. For the startups, we allow to have 5 employees in the start of the 3 years period, because we think that it's quite strict requirement from OECD and Eurostat to have 10. They're just new startups, but we think that they already demonstrated some ability to grow and to have more employees than the most of other companies. And Norway consists of very small entities. So then our high growth startups group cover enterprises with at least 5 employees in the start of 3 years period, and with average annualized growth by 10%. We identified additional group of micro startups, which have just from 1 to 4 employees, but which have demonstrated very clear innovation ambitions. And here we took advantage of having access to the register on public support for innovation and R&D. I will present some slides and details a little bit later on this register. And then this group is very interesting to follow because they're small, but they have clear innovation ambitions. And the last group among startups is Counsellors. It's completely according to your definition of Counsellors in OECD and Eurostat. They have at least 10 employees and have annualized growth by 20% at least. And if you do the same procedure for the established enterprises, which were about more than 80,000 in 2023, active and employee enterprises, which were at least 5 years old, about 10,000 were growing micro enterprises, so they have less employees in the start of 3 years period, just from 1 to 9, but they still show some growth, at least 10%. And then the group which coincide with definition of Eurostat, high growth enterprises, which have at least 10 employees in the start of 3 years period and have at least 10% annualized average growth. We again define additional group which have clear innovation abilities. They are smaller. They have at least 5 employees, but they have got some support for their innovation and R&D. And finally, mature scale-ups, which again coincide with definition with OECD and Eurostat. And we see that all these groups are quite small in numbers in 2023, but then we have almost 2 decades of the data. And just to demonstrate how we use the public support register and what is this register, we have complete information on all enterprises which get support from different public agencies to innovation and R&D, Innovation Norway, Research Council of Norway, Tax Credit SkatteFUNN, which get some support through EU research programs, and some other like regional research councils and other small agencies. And if you look at the distribution of recipients by age, for example, we see that a lot of new established firms get support from Innovation Norway, which have specific programs for new startups, and relatively more mature companies get support from Research Council of Norway and EU research programs. At the same time, our tax credit scheme is available for all innovative companies. And it's represented very well through different ages of the companies and used quite broadly. And first feature, which was very puzzling for us, it's based on the official statistics before we started to do this analysis, that when we look at the number of high growth startups and scale-ups in Norway and how this number changed through this long time period, we saw that it goes up and down, but it followed the macroeconomic picture. It goes down under the crisis, both financial crisis and pandemic, and go up after. But we don't see any increase, even when we saw that it's a very huge increase in supporting programs for R&D and innovation. And the same is for young scale-ups. The number there is quite stable. So it was very unclear what kind of mechanism works there. Is it just macroeconomic picture, or is it some possibilities to help to get more high growth enterprises in Norway? So we really need to go into details here. When we look at the contribution of growing enterprises into value creation, it's not surprisingly that startup groups have a small contribution, and mature companies, growing companies, more remarkable contribution. But in total, this small group, which is actually under 5% of the all active companies in Norway, they contribute with more than 20, at average about 20% in value creation. Unfortunately, this share was decreasing during this time, which also quite puzzling, maybe against what we wish to see. If we look at the productivity, value creation per employee for different groups of growing companies, we see it's not very huge difference here between different groups. And scale-ups in pipeline, those mature companies which have clear innovation ambitions, they looks to be most productive among these growing company groups. And I will provide some insight in the international comparison. Here we used very well-known publication from OECD, Entrepreneurship at a Glance, and Norway was included last time in 2016 with numbers for 2013. And we used the Eurostat data and our national data to provide the same figure for the last available year, last summer, 2022. And we can see that Norway is around the middle by share of scale-ups among firms with at least 10 employees. And this share actually went down during the last decade, while Sweden provided a remarkable increase. And when we also looked at the difference by industry, manufacturing versus services and construction, so actually Norway does it quite well in the manufacturing. They are on the second place, but this sector is very small in Norway. So, but in the service sector, it's Norway is quite low and close to the bottom. That's why the result is in the middle when we look at the totals. As I talked, it's very important, one of both the access to the right skills and the capital is mentioned to be crucial, both for the survival and the growth. And usually it's very difficult to find information on the availability of risk capital. So here we used again the advantage of availability of a stakeholder register, and we could identify 3 groups of risk capital investors, which are not private, but from the fund as funds. And these 3 groups are fund management companies, financial groups and public administration, and family-owned investment companies, including holding companies. And we looked at their portfolio, which share of high growth companies these 3 groups of funds have. And we can see that financial groups and public administration, they have the highest share of high growth enterprises in their portfolio. And actually all types of funds, they increased the part in their portfolio of high growth enterprises from 2013 to 2023. So it seems that high growth enterprises become more smarter to show that they have potential to growth and to attract risk capital. If you look on the opposite side, what share of the high growth enterprises have some risk capital in among their investors? So for Norway, it's family-owned investment companies is a very important group of investors. It might be different in other countries, but in Norway, it was interesting to observe this result. And again, especially scale-ups in pipeline is most attractive group. So they seems to be more smart to show that they have ambitious, that they have clear ambitious to growth and to innovate. When we look at the distribution of the high growth enterprise by county, regional distribution and industrial distribution, it was different interesting observations here. We didn't find any big changes in the geographical distribution through the time for high growth enterprises. So during these 2 decades, the share of high growth enterprise was very close to the average for the whole period average. But we observed very strong differences by industry. So what we observed is the structural change and a strong downward trend in the number of scale-ups for the most industrial, manufacturing industries and construction, retail trade, and oil-related sectors towards ICT and business service, which stands positively in number of scale-ups. One interesting observation, maybe also for you, is that industry, accommodation and food service activities, which was very hard hit by under pandemic, they deliver very high numbers now, and it's not surprising because all definitions of high growth enterprises are based on the freeze period, and compared to the 2020 when this industry was providing and downsizing and providing very bad numbers. Now it's maybe back to the normal, but in statistics, it delivers very nice results. It's just to be aware of some technicalities of yours and ours definition when we analyze. And these numbers actually influence the whole statistical results for 2023, but it's early to see about some boost of high growth enterprises in 2023. We need to see some next year and maybe a couple of years to see if we have some positive trends there. But what was again very puzzling when we did this exercise, that we observed the positive trend in scale-ups in pipeline, both in all regions and in the most of industries, but we did not observe this trend for the scale-ups. So something happens between these two stages. When you already showed that you succeeded to growth to some extent, you have very clear innovation ambitions, and we have more such enterprises, but they do not go to the next stage and do not scale. So it's still, we need to understand what mechanism, what happens. And we had different hypotheses. We had hypothesis that maybe many of these companies, they had ambitions to grow to some extent, but when they filled their niche and some demand, reached some demand level, they just stabilized and stopped to have ambitions to growth. We had hypothesis that maybe some of these companies were open for acquisition, and that was our main goal for the next step of this analysis. And just to demonstrate some, give you some visual support for this puzzle, that we see positive trend, number of scale-ups in pipeline by industry, but for the number of scale-ups, it's a downward trend for many industry groups. And now I come maybe to the most interesting part of our analysis, is where we focus on the young and promising companies, these three groups which I talked about, both high growth startups, micro startups with clear innovation ambitions and gazelles. And we followed these companies 3 years after, 6 years after, and 9 years after. And we could then check if they still grow, if they stabilize, if they downsize, if they exit, go bankruptcy or voluntary liquidation, or they went through acquisition. And what we observed, that already 4 in 10 stabilized growth after 3 years. So it's partly a support to our hypothesis that ambitions, growth ambitions die for quite many companies after the first stage of growth. 4 in 10 are bankrupt or liquidated after 9 years. So this way to become scale-up is very, very complicated. We observed that 1 in 4 after 3 years still growth, and only 6% become scale-ups. 1 in 7, they continue growth after 6 years, and only 3 are scale-ups, and only 1 in 10 continue growth after 9 years, and only 2% become scale-ups. So it's really very small amount among young and promising companies reach their scale-up definition after 9 years. And we have also some sophisticated interactive pictures for this 3, 6, and 9 years analysis. We also calculated success rates for growth of startups and gazelles. And we can see that there are micro startups who marks them as a group which have higher odds to keep growing. But we remember that these companies are very, very small. So then it's easier for them to reach these high growth rates. At the same time, there are gazelles who showed ability to grow from the start during their first 5 years of existence. They have the higher odds to keep being scale-ups in the both 3, 6, and 9 years period. But we see that the scaling slows quickly. Only 1 in 10 young scale-ups continue scaling after 3 years, only 1 in 20 after 6 years, and only 1 in 30 after 9 years. So it's really not so easy to keep going. When we look at the exit rates, it's interesting that micro startups, they were the group which demonstrated higher odds to keep growing, but they have also higher exit rates. So it's very volatile group. It's like you win or you disappear. At the same time, the gazelles who demonstrated higher odds to be scale-ups, they have also higher rates, acquisition rates. So they have higher interest to be bought by another company. And to sum up this part of the analysis, Norway has seen a decline in the share of high growth firms compared to other European countries. The number of high growth firms has not increased despite more public support, which is not the primary goal of public support. Usually public support for R&D is evaluated by looking at the increase in R&D spendings and innovation rates, and we do find it in many evaluations of our programs, but we don't see so much reflection in the increasing number of high growth enterprises. We have observed structural change that ICT and service sectors are growing in number of high growth companies, while industrial sectors are stagnating. We observed that family-owned investment companies are the dominant owners of high growth companies in Norway, while fund and public investors play a smaller role. But again, we just observed the indicators of participation in these funds, but not the scope, how much capital they come in. This information we do not have. We observed that micro startups show the strongest ability to sustain growth over time, while gazelles are most likely to become scale-ups. But this analysis was descriptive in nature and does not provide very strong evidence what is hampering or what is drivers factors of the growth, but it gives very valuable starting point where to go further. And since I have a little bit time, so I will show first results of further analysis, which is building on this report, where I have master student, which is writing master degree now on this topic, and where we investigate how survival and growth effects are impacted by innovation support. And this is very preliminary results, so I hope that maybe discussion here help us to go further and find maybe some important questions to investigate as a part of this analysis. But what we do now, we have information, as I said, from the Register on Public Support, and we again focus on this group of young and promising companies, and we look now what happens with them 3, 6, and 9 years after. And then we study what are the odds to survive, and given that you are survived, what then is probability to growth versus to stabilize or even decline. And we use a two-step model where we first model the survival probability to survive. And after that, taking into account that you survived and conditional on what you survived, we analyze the probability to growth versus to stabilize or downsize. And it's always very difficult to find very good instruments, to find some factors which influence survival, but not your outcome to be the growth. So we use non-linear function to identify this two-step model. And our first results show that that public support from Innovation Norway and tax credit SkatteFUNN have positive association from survival. And again, this already highly selected group of firms which demonstrated high ability to growth and innovate in the first 5 years of their existence. But still, there is some need to help to survive. And given that they survived, then also support from both Innovation Norway and Tax Credit and Research Council of Norway impact positively the probability to growth. Interesting that support from EU research programs have not any significant results on the Norwegian startups. So this is what I have present for today. So I hope to get some questions or comments which will help us to move further on this topic. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Marina. We indeed have already some questions from online, but before I open the floor and we start addressing this question, I would like to invite and give the floor to our lead discussant, who will provide some reaction to the report and some avenues for reflection on how to move this forward. So I'm very pleased to invite Eleonora Bartolini, who is a senior economist at the Italian National Institute of Statistics, ISTAT. So Eleonora, thank you very much for accepting our invitation, and the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you so much for this presentation, which is really interesting, and also for inviting me to contribute to the discussion. I would like to use my discussion to raise a few broader questions that naturally emerge from this kind of descriptive evidence. I also prepared some slides, but they are few points that I will touch during my discussion. So I don't know if yes, I can share. No, this one. Can you see something?
We can see it, yes.
But I cannot enlarge my presentation. Okay. I can try to move. But in any case, as I say, just few points that I want to touch. The first point is something that Marina already touched in her presentation. That is, what do we mean by firm growth? Because the report measures firm growth primarily through employment expansion, employment growth. And of course, this is a common indicator of firm expansion, also relatively easy to use in international comparisons. But from a broader economic perspective, we know that the firm growth can take several forms, not only employment growth, of course, but also value-added growth, which is less volatile than measures such as turnover or revenues, which in turn are more affected by, for example, production costs. And also, another important measure, in my view, is the productivity growth, which of course is based on both the previous measure, but it is a measure of firm efficiency, and also highly linked to the quality of jobs created, and so it allows us to understand which kind of employment growth we are producing. And of course, also technological upgrading, because this is something more difficult sometimes to measure, but this is the primary source of economic growth, and thus affecting productivity. What I mean is that in many modern economies, in many modern sectors, particular digital and knowledge-intensive sectors, firms may scale not necessarily in terms of rapid employment expansion, but in different firms. So we need to capture the entire story. Focusing on rapid employment growth may capture only one side of the story, and we need to have a complete picture of the economic impact of startups, scale-up firms. And this is the first point. Sorry, but okay. Another point that came to my mind is how we can move from counting high growth or growth firms to understanding their economic impact. Because these reports show that the number of high growth firms increases in ICT, in business services, and it seems that it declines in several traditional sectors such as manufacturing and construction. However, in my view, counting high growth firms year by year is not sufficient to understand their economic impact. The key question is whether we are observing a genuine sectoral transformation in the allocation of employment growth, or we are observing changes occurring within existing sectors. I think that this distinction matters because within sector growth and between sector reallocation may have very different implications for productivity and structural transformation. If growth occurs mainly within existing sectors, the macroeconomic impact may be limited. If instead growth also reflects reallocation toward higher productivity sector, this may signal structural transformation. And I can bring some Italian evidences just to illustrate this point. Clearly, Norway and Italy are very different economies. I see Norway as a small but highly open economy, which is strongly specialized in energy exports. Italy is a diversified manufacturing economy characterized by a dense network of exporting small and medium enterprise. But in any case, if I see Italy has experienced recently a not trivial employment growth, and this is what emerged, for example, from the last report of the Italian Productivity Board. But much of this expansion has occurred in labor-intensive sectors with weak productivity dynamics. So, as a result, employment has increased while productivity growth at the aggregate level remain weak. So, to me, this highlights that the key question is not only how many firms grow, but where growth occurs in the economic structure and how it affects productivity dynamics. Then maybe I have to change the slide, but the other point, that I want to raise is what we can call this sort of a scale-up puzzle, no? Because one of the findings of the report is that despite increased public support for innovation, the number of high-growth firms and scale-ups has not increased significantly. And at the same time, we see that there is a substantial group of firms classified as scale-ups in pipeline, that is firms showing innovation signals, so innovation activity. They grow, but they're not yet are able to reach the scale-up threshold. No, I think that this suggests is intriguing as a result, because this suggests that the key challenge may not be necessarily the creation of startup, but rather the transition from early growth to, say, the next size ladder, upward mobility along the size ladder. In other words, we can say that the bottleneck may lie in the scaling phase rather than in the initial phase, in the startup phase. And again, there is evidence that I can bring in Italy, but I don't think that this is only an Italian peculiarity, because many firms, at least in Italy, tend to grow. We have signals of growth, employment growth, so size growth, but this growth is confined within their existing size class, characteristic size class, rather than climbing or moving to the next size ladder. And so understanding these dynamics is important, although it requires maybe different approaches. We have to use transition matrix approaches applied to firm level microdata in order to track movements across size classes over time. And clearly this have productivity implications, because if I see again our evidences, I can see that when firms are able to, say, move to the next size class, to climb the size ladder, and indeed we have a few number of firms that are able to do that, at least in Italy. So when we see that it happens, there is also a stronger productivity growth compared to firms that remain in the same size class. However, the Italian experience suggests that this is not enough, because even when some firms move across size classes, these transitions appear to be very limited to significantly affect aggregate productivity dynamics. So this highlights the very important link that we need to analyze between dimensional growth of firms, productivity dynamics, sectoral composition of growth. Maybe another point, okay, this is already talk about that. Okay, the last point, the financing of growth firm, because this is the link between financing structure and firm scaling is relevant, of course. This report provides interesting evidence that family investors appear to be the most common investors in Norway. while funds and institutional investors may play a more limited role. And then they suggest that growth may be financed more by entrepreneurial capital than venture capital or other institutional investment. And this, to me, raises question about the role of financial systems in supporting firm scaling, but also the role of the institutional framework at the country level. If I look at my country, but also this is something in common with other economies, I see that we have a more bank-based financing system. I think also in Germany or also in Japan, they share with us this kind of financial system. Partly this may reflect historical reasons, the historical role of banks in the post-war reconstruction and industrial development. But this may be associated also with a lower propensity for risk-taking compared to more market-based systems, and then what I mean is that the institutional setting may influence both the availability of capital and the speed and nature of firm scaling. So to go to an end, I think that interpreting the evolution of high-growth firm requires considering the broader economic and institutional context. And yeah, the dimension that I try to touch are sectoral composition of firms growth, their ability to move and then to the transition toward higher size classes, the contribution to productivity and value added, and also the financial system supporting firm expansion. All these aspects can have country-specific patterns, and this is relevant because this may affect the validity and also the interpretation of international comparison. So I think that I finish my discussion. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Eleonora. I think it provides a lot of very interesting points for discussion. So before I open the floor for further question, I think I will give you some time in case you want to reply to some of the points that Eleonora raised. I just want to add two questions which were asked in the chat already, and I think are very related to the discussion that Eleonora just provided. So one question additionally asked whether high growth enterprises were necessarily among the most productivity or higher productive firms. So I think you already mentioned this a bit in your presentation. And the second question was so asking, people often associate high growth startups with innovation, and whether you had some insights on the companies in your sample that are truly innovative. So again, I think you already touched upon a bit upon that, but yeah, if you want to say more and reply to Eleonora.
Thank you very much, Eleonora, for your valuable comments. Actually liked, maybe most of all, reflected on this discussion on the role of financial institutions and public institutions, and actually what you said, that family-owned funds are the main investors in Norway, that can have impact on their risk taking and their ambitions for growth. It's actually very interesting discussion, debate now, and I know that now there is a process, active process in Norway where Innovation Norway in discussion with EU have established several agreements with several banks to open funding of startups and innovative firms on the higher scale through banks than maybe directly through the public innovation support agencies. So actually there are some changes happening in Norway right now, and it will be very interesting to follow whether it will be reflected in the numbers and statistics after some years. Also very interesting reflection of your comparison of Italy and Norway. Definitely different countries, but still interesting reflections. This question on productivity is very crucial. Our numbers do not show that different groups of high growth enterprises differ a lot on productivity on the group level, but I believe I haven't seen these numbers, but if we compare them with other groups which are not high growth enterprises, it will be interesting to see whether they do provide higher productivity. We saw that scale-ups in pipeline are more productive among the group of high growth enterprises, but definitely we need to see on other enterprises to be sure that we work with high productive companies and not only high growth in terms of employment. Very many very good comments and advices. So I hope I can get your slides to reflect better on this different size class and to catch up better scaling up. So thank you.
Yeah, I think that shouldn't be an issue to share with you the slides. So I think now we can open the floor to questions also in the room. So again, a few housekeeping rules. If you're in the room and want to ask a question, please use the microphone. Online, you have already started to ask questions in the chat or Q&A. You can continue to do so, but if you want to speak directly, we can also assist you in enabling the microphone. So while we gather more questions, I think there are already questions in the chat that we can start answering. So I will try to group few of them and we can go step by step. So one of the questions was how and to what extent do scale-up leave the country? What percentage of the scale-ups relocate to the US, for instance, or to other European countries? And also in terms of, I would say, the destiny of these startups, there is a question on whether acquisition by other firms could lead to negative selection among the startups that remain independent.
Thank you for these questions. It's definitely a very interesting topic, and when we started to look at the acquisitions, it was one of my questions too, and especially for the ICT sector, where we do the highest growth in the number of scale-ups in pipeline, but not so high growth in the number of scale-ups. And one of the hypotheses was whether they disappear through acquisitions in this sector, which is quite easy to maybe to do even from abroad, while other industries, more like home-based industries. But actually we can get this support that exactly these firms from this sector have higher acquisition rates than other sectors. They are on average. The sector which had the highest rate of acquisition was the energy industry in Norway. So interesting observation. It's also in the report or commented in the report. We looked at the acquisition rates by industry group. I cannot, or we couldn't at this stage say which country or from which country. the Norwegian young and promising companies disappear most too. So I cannot answer whether it's US or some other countries. This is possibly will be the next research question. The topic is interesting. And some of my colleagues work with projects on how much of Norwegian enterprises are owned from abroad. So this is work in progress. So we definitely can discuss with them whether it's interesting to focus on the young and promising companies as a subgroup in their analysis. Have I got something, or have I answered these questions? Thank you.
Are there any questions in the room?
Hello, thank you for the presentation. I'm Dimitri. I work here with ISTAT and Entrepreneurship team. It's more of a comment to share with you. So we have some research actually trying to understand this puzzle of, more public support doesn't lead to sort of more startups. So we have a paper with some colleagues from the unit, basically where we look at how different sort of financial instruments, sort of what are like the financing paths that these companies follow after receiving certain instruments. Basically what we see that companies that receive sort of public support like grants and stuff like this, they lock in grants in the sense that they don't transition to this private equity, which seems to be, in terms of quantities, and especially for later stages of the company, it seems to be sort of a more relevant instrument than what grants can provide. So if you want, we can share this study with you. I think it can fit sort of a bit in this narrative, in the sense that increased public support doesn't lead necessarily to more startups. I mean, basically the conclusion of the study is that we need to transition to private equity. We also find actually that non-financial support, and I don't know if you maybe have some data on some programs on this sort of, non-financial assistance sort of programs that provide, skills, training, connections to these, startups, to sort of private investors, industry people. Might be also interesting to see. And of course, we can share with you this study. Maybe it helps you to understand a bit this puzzle.
Okay, thank you. Definitely, we want you to share with us your results. We don't have detailed information on training. It's usually survey data, not registered data in Norway. But from this public support register, we have information on other type of support, as networking, industrial innovation clusters, industrial gardens, and incubators, so which help to grow your networks. So it's definitely a possibility to check if this kind of support provides some better or other type of results. Yes, I guess training will be more difficult. We have plans to check for the access to the private funds, if how they, in combination with public support, works. And as you said, usually if you start to get public support, there are two-sided effects. It's like, of course, it's a very strong signal that you have a good idea. And in some surveys, especially when we evaluated tax credits, and we had some surveys of the users of tax credits, they personally said that the fact that they obtain tax credit was a strong signal to the banks and private investors that they have a good idea and they succeeded to get private investment. So it can be a very positive signal, but it can be, as you said, increase in their dependence of the public support, and they get known better how to search and get and obtain and use. So it's actually two different effects which might be difficult to identify, but still it's not only negative, but it's also a positive possible effect of getting public support. It's like to send you back some remarks.
Great. We have other question that relates, I would say, to the measurement and what's the right measurement of growth. So we have a question which says, startups, especially in AI, often claim to follow a lean startup strategy. Does this not imply that employment may have become less relevant to assess enterprise growth? And do you have indication for Norway on high growth firms when looking at revenue, even if this fluctuates more than employment?
This topic was very, very hot on spot on into 2025. Actually, we had 3 different studies which came after each other. One from Innovation Norway, and they focused on the high growth enterprises in terms of revenues. And then, you can say that ICT companies were very well represented there. We had a report from McKinsey, which focused on the high growth enterprise on frontier and their role in the economy of growth. And we came with our report based on the high growth enterprises in terms of employment. So for the group of AI firms and firms enterprises operating in the ICT sector, I can understand this argument. Our goal was to try to make an analysis based on the long-term trends and like to fill the gap on this topic. So we do not refuse that growth in revenues is an important indicator. We might identify high growth enterprises in these terms, and definitely we will do that in the future too, to have even better picture for the high growth enterprise in Norway. So yes, for this sector, and we know that this sector is very important in Norway, it's highly growing as a industry group, and we might have specific analysis of this sector and their role in productivity and growth, and then we can use different definitions. And as Eleonora said, that it's only one side of the story, and of course we want to look from different angles and to find the questions. But I think this report helped us to see where we should go further and even deeper. So thank you for your comments. It's just support our thinking too.
Great. So we look forward to see the following analysis. So there are other questions. One relate to why do you think the family-owned investment companies are the dominant owners of high growth companies?
Actually, I don't have answer for this question. It was a very interesting observation and quite surprising observation. So I don't think that we were aware of it. But Norway have very small companies. So maybe just, and as Eleonora said, that we don't have very strong culture for the funds, supporting from professional funds. So maybe it's the area where we are different.
Thank you. Another question: when looking at the number of share of scale-ups in the ecosystem, the explanation often points to a lack of ambition. But what about reallocation? And could it be that Norway is currently facing a network selling effect, with successful scale-ups relocating to other regions. So I think it's a bit related to what we discussed before.
To other regions, is it the meaning to other regions, to other countries?
I think yes.
Yeah. The acquisition rates are not so high to be aware of. And we didn't have opportunity, or again, the last year, it was on our list of interest to see national acquisitions against acquisitions from abroad, but it was quite time demanding to go through that, but it's on our list of plans. But as I said, the acquisition rates are not very high. So, and if you think that many of these acquisitions are happening at the national level and only some of them at the level from Norway to abroad, so we need, before I can answer, I really need to have more support from the data. But from the first glance, it was not like a huge problem, at least for the high growth enterprise. And again, we focused on the subset of young and promising companies. But if you look at all companies, maybe the numbers will be different.
Thank you. We have another question, which I think relates partly also to what Dimitri was asking before. So one of the determinant and success of growth is also human capital. And the question asks, what are the main reasons why scale-up might struggle to attract talent? And whether there are some measures that are already put in place or try to address potential issues related to lack of talent, skill shortages.
Thank you for this question. We haven't seen primarily on the problems for scale-ups to attract relevant skills, but as other reports, national reports show that there is a common problem for Norwegian firms to attract talents, especially from abroad, and to have relevant skill, lack of relevant skills mentioned of majority of companies, that they bring limitations. So I guess this is not the problem the only problem of scaling up, but it's actually the general problem at the national level. And a lot of people are discussing this problem. So
do we have a question in the room as well? Your microphone.
Oh, yes. About this. Thanks a lot for the presentation. It was very interesting. My name is Petra Kelly, and I work in the microbird team. So first of all, thanks a lot for running our microbird code. Actually, I have two really quick questions, but feel free to pick just one of them. First of all, I was wondering about the sort of, what do you know about the innovation that these startups produce, and do you know anything about the sort of flavor of this innovation? There's a few papers that claim that startups are responsible for a lot of the radical innovation, and is that something you find in your data, if you do have that information? And the second thing that sort of caught my interest in your presentation was that during oil crises, I believe the numbers of sort of startups created went up. And what's your, because I can imagine the sort of a variety of mechanisms that could play a role in that. Maybe there's sort of, a story about sort of labor competition between, these two sort of employment opportunities. What's your intuition about why that's happening?
Thank you for your reflections and questions. About scope of innovation, how radical they are, we haven't started this question yet. As said, this analysis was mapping, and the main goal was to establish this taxonomy, which can be used in different directions for numerous possibilities in the future. So I guess this is a good idea to see what kind of innovation, how radical innovation these young and promising companies do and high growth companies do. Definitely. About your second question, when it was oil price crisis in 2014-15, it was like a stable number of scale-ups and maybe growing number, I don't remember it exactly, of young scale-ups. I know that there were several studies on how this oil price crisis, which impact they had on the mobility of high-skilled persons. And we have some of my colleagues from Statistics Norway, they observed that many engineers and high-skilled employees, they moved from oil sector to other sectors. So it was positive leakage of high-skilled people from one sector to many other sectors. So it was a negative shock for one sector with positive spillovers, knowledge spillovers to others. So it might then be reflected in more higher numbers in young scale-ups. Definitely, but I cannot tell you if it's exactly how it worked, but I just can imagine that it worked, since the high-skilled employees, they moved from, they missed their work. So some of them, they went to established companies, some of them started their own business. That was analyzed by my colleagues. Yeah.
So people are thanking you for a very interesting presentation in the chat. And someone asked about the sectoral distribution of scale-ups. Do you have any information on how many of the scale-ups are part of industrial value chains? That is, where the growth might be directly affected by the demand of their clients in a specific supply chain?
Unfortunately not. I don't have this information, value chains. But thank you again. It's very interesting question. And of course, I guess it would be an advantage for the study to might identify such value chains. We did establish an alternative grouping of industries to take into account some parts of value chains creation, like food and beverages, together with some producing sectors, and the same for fishery, but it was not applied in this analysis. So we can think in this direction too then. So as I said, this analysis was just a base for the future research. So all your comments I take with me home to discussion with my colleagues. Thank you.
Great. I think we have time for one last quick question, or actually two that I would like to merge. They're still about measurement and the relevance of employment-based statistics, but from a slightly different angle. So one asks, if innovative firms and industries have a disproportionately higher AI absorption capacity, then regions and countries with a higher share of innovative scale-ups may appear disadvantaged in employment-based growth statistics. So the question is, do you agree? And there is also a very, I would say, technical question on how you handle gaps in panel observation. So you need, for growth measurement, you need to follow firms over time. And if a firm disappears from the data for some years, how do you handle that? With these missing intermediate periods.
Okay, I start with second question because it's easier for me to answer. We have registered data, so we don't have so much gaps, so it's not a huge problem for us. But when the firm exit from population, so we observe that, and this is a part of our model. So I guess we have quite good control on that. The first question is more challenging. Again, it was a national analysis with focus on Norway, not so much with thinking about the whole economy, regional economy as Europe or Nordic countries. So I think here we need to discuss it's in the broader context, and that's why I present here to get with me this broader context and question. So I really need to think and reflect. I don't have answer to this question, sorry, not yet.
Yeah, I think that the purpose of the seminar is also to discuss and propose avenues for future work. So I hope you got a lot of insight from this discussion.
But I really hope that this presentation will be to inspiration to some other countries to provide some insights from their side that we could discuss and to get this broader perspective on this topic, because it's very important, I guess. This is a knowledge gap to understand how to get or to help from startup to growth.
Yeah, absolutely. So we also encourage everyone to reach out to us if you have relevant insights and to share this with us. We are happy to foster the discussion on this topic. And indeed, I think the presentation that you delivered offered a lot of food for thought as well for us, also in our team and at the OECD, on how to measure, how to combine the indicators. So we are working also on productivity and business dynamics, and I think this is very complementary. Looking at this scale-up issue. So I think we are arriving at the end of the seminar. So I want to take the opportunity to thank you again for presenting and sharing your insights. So I express my gratitude to you. I would like also, of course, to thank Minister, Counsellor, and Deputy Permanent Representative of Norway to the OECD, Siri, for the welcome remarks and for accepting our invitation. And of course, as well to Eleonora Bartolini from ISTAT for her discussion. So, of course, I would like also to thank everyone who participated to the seminar here in person or online. We wish you a pleasant day, but before I let you leave, I want to advertise that we will have another PI seminar on April 28 with Richard Davis from the London School of Economics on the topic of productivity slowdown, declining business dynamism, and inflation, evidence from the UK and implication for policy. So I think we will have another very rich discussion, and we hope to see you there. Thank you very much and have a great day.